Hello, hello. How are we doing today?
Where's the energy?
Where's the energy? Yes. Fernando, do you like the energy in the room?
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
I can feel it. I'm a Latvian.
Here you go. Well, I'm very excited about this session. Michael, let's kick it off.
Sure. So we're going to talk about sort of the importance of blockchain in your house, and I want to sort of take a step back and talk about sort of the importance of having good data. I'll start with sort of the secondary market and how that comes back into the primary market. So I had the great pleasure of serving on the board of something called Common Securitization Solutions. I know we have a bunch of real estate folks. Has anybody ever heard of that? Yeah, like one or two hands, right? No normal person should know what this is. But it's basically it's a technology company that was started a few years ago. Actually, the government did it when they took Fannie and Freddie into conservatorship. So, in the U.S., we have the great benefit of having the idea of conforming mortgages that you can bundle together and then sell in the secondary market. And those mortgage-backed securities backed by Fannie or Freddie are basically fungible back and forth because there's conforming terms and loan sizes and all that other sort of stuff. But we ended up with an odd situation where in the secondary market, the Fannie mortgage-backed securities were trading differently than the Freddies for whatever reason, and that there was an illiquidity premium in there, and so the idea was to create a uniform mortgage-backed security through this technology platform. So they were able to do that. There's still a lot of incredible amount of costs that are in the system to actually do that. But that's one example of where when we have standardization, we get the benefit of having more secondary market liquidity. And that secondary market liquidity is actually priced in the primary market and the mortgage rates. And so that would bring down actually the mortgage rate. So if we can get more of this onto the blockchain or get this stuff on the blockchain, we can increase the liquidity even better, take costs out of the system, and then decrease mortgage rates even further.
Yeah, absolutely. And financing is a cornerstone for capitalism, especially in the developing countries. And that was outlined in Hernando de Soto book, The Mystery of Capital, how clear title to land was essential for our current civilization, the modern civilization, to establish financing opportunities for people so they can borrow against their ownership and launch ventures, businesses, bring more value to this asset. And of course, financing in a sense that we know in the US, and gets further deeper. It's securities that are liquid. We've been talking with Mike about privatization of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And if the whole system is brought on blockchain, starting with the title, then the financing opportunity in the form of DeFi, then the mortgage-backed securities, then we'll have a whole transparent, well working machine working together with less fees between all those values to be transitioned between each other. And then those collapses like we've experienced in 2008 won't be possible. In the US, it's addressed to some extent with the policies, but in many other countries that are copying the system in America, if they have this jump to the new technology like the Web3 enabled technology, establishing clear title to land and then financing opportunity and then securities, mortgage-backed securities trading, then they will experience this growth of capitalism that would be the foundation for democracy globally. So, Hernando, what does it mean for you, blockchain and its relation to a house?
Thank you. I apologize. I'm going to look at my notes, but I thought it was on another panel before, so I've had to improvise. Here's the way I came into it. I hadn't traveled to the United States. I only stepped on U.S. soil and started being accustomed to Americans and their virtues and their institutions about 30 years ago. And as I walked in, I remember, as I was known in Peru, and went through migrations, that somebody said, who are you? And I said, I'm Hernando de Soto. And then they said, And I said, I want to talk to you about it. I've lived in Europe most of my life. I've studied economics, but I've also done a little bit of law. And they said, look, just hand over your passport. And I handed over my passport, and he put it to a gliding machine. And then I started understanding that when you live in a global world, you live in society, you just don't know everybody by their name. You know them by representations of who you are. And that made it interesting, so that when I went back to Peru, and then we founded even a think tank to look at it. What does it mean uh, that you have a house, you got a home, but is it something else? And there's more than just having a home. The house is a point of reference for a whole bunch of things, like you're saying, finance and credit, but it also gives you limited liability. In the United States, one way or another, your laws, when you make a deal, you make an exchange, there's only so much you can be liable for. Well, in Latin America and 70% of the world, there is no limited liability. Every time you get into you make a deal, you're into unlimited liability. It's as if you were in a big poker game like one of the ones in the film. And that means that your transactions go down and the value of things go down and the risks are, are immense. The next thing is that people act differently for things they're responsible for than for things they're not responsible. And being on the internet and blockchain based on title, you are going to be more responsible about your home than you're going to be about just about anything else. If you are on record, for example, when you fellows were at war in Afghanistan and you try to find Osama bin Laden, it took you 9 years. It took you 9 years because he didn't have a title to his cave. And that's the way it's always going to be. Criminals hide out where there are no addresses. As a matter of fact, the first definition of a criminal is no address whatsoever. So I'm trying to say the kind of things that you're not. All the addresses joined together. There's a word in Greek that is very interesting. It's called anoikis. Anoikis means what is the condition of what happens to somebody whose cells are dying and they don't connect to each other anymore. When cells that we're all made of, millions of cells, don't connect to each other, they die. And anoikis means in Greek, homelessness. So it's very important that you have addresses and that your house be in what I believe Web3 people call the metaverse, the world of passports and representations, because they say a lot of things that aren't being told to you if you're just seeing yourself as physically the house. So unless you want a country of carpenters, there's all of that, and it allows you to put things together and combine uh, because when your house is at risk, if you are a serious person, it allows you to promise, to commit, to assert, and to bring out hopes. So when I was reading, you know, Mark Andreessen's idea, what he wanted to do with Web3, just to bring into it, and blockchain, of course, he says, and something you were just right, I don't know, he connects to what I'm going to say, but he says we all spectrum of human possibilities come around. One of which, of course, is financing, but it's also another thing. It creates investment capital. Investment capital. The reason I go back to what I said before, but I think it's really very important that the Chinese are now replacing you not only in Latin America but in India and all over the place, is because the first thing they do is not only get a property title to whatever they're going to exploit, they also get a sovereign right to the subsoil. So it's like two property titles, and with that, they not only get property on the surface, they're displacing you because they're getting property on the subsurface, which is where you got right now $150 trillion of all the rare earths that you need for China to outdo the United States. So let me go back to it. If blockchain is the best way to communicate and to pick up identities regarding homes, it's pretty important because it not only creates finance, it does the things I talked to you about, and it is the basis for creating investment capital. You don't have investment capital and create it unless you have a title to something, as opposed to money, where all you need is a debt.
I'd like to actually also dive into why do you think blockchain technology is the best solution, best technology to achieve what you have outlined in your book for so many years ago without mentioning the word blockchain. And I think I got very inspired from one of the Milken Institute sessions where Mike, you were actually moderating, and Kathy Wood was on the panel, and Brian Armstrong, the CEO and the founder of Coinbase. They were discussing the concept of ownership for property rights, what it means, and how blockchain is the essential technology to bring property rights. And they were actually mentioning your book that Kathy mentioned that your book was pretty instrumental in understanding the mystery of capital, how you create the investment capital. But blockchain, why? How did you get introduced to blockchain? Why you think it's the best modern technology to put this huge asset class, even two asset classes, the top and the bottom, as you mentioned?
Well, you probably know that better than I do. But basically, what it does is it's the trust thing. Is that you get all the information you get with a title, and you package it in such a way that it's immutable. As you know, when things are ink on paper, you're going to erase much faster. As a matter of fact, the first thing you see when you're it's in the Middle East and the Mediterranean since times immemorial. The first thing Alexander the Great does, and Gaddafi does 2,500 years later, is they burn all the records and start again. So the advantage about blockchain is that having solid stuff that is in the metaverse is harder to get at. So that's one security. And the reason why that can change the world is simply because when people have to put information about their homes, you have to be truthful. I can go around and try and get credit, and I'll say, my name is Mike, and that will set them off for a while. I'm a citizen of Georgia, and that'll.
Do you think it should be public?
What?
Do you think this information should be public?
Of course. If you want to participate in the global economy and not starve, absolutely. But the important thing is that when you put a title, you have to tell the truth. Because if I say I am Mike and I die, Mike gets it, right? Or when the credit man comes around, Mike gets it. So when you title since times immemorial, and you've got to fill in, that's when civilizations began. We were tribes before, because all of a sudden you could identify somebody that wasn't your neighbor. I mean, all names in the world come from somebody. For example, I'm De Soto, which means I'm from the bush. This other guy's called Townsend. He comes from there, etc. Well, since addresses come around, one of the things that you find out is that most developed countries have addresses, and others don't. I mean, literally, I remember I was in Costa Rica, a place, and I went to the Peruvian embassy, and they said, when you come out, hit Clinton Avenue, you go to the left at the church, then you move ahead to the drugstore, you go to blah, 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 and that's how you get there. Really, it is a problem in 70% of those. So addresses, the representation of the house is very important, and no matter how you look at it, blockchain is a crucial way to transmit it. The only thing that is missing now, as far as I'm concerned, regarding blockchain, is that you've got to attach it to also the arguments of the third world, because if you may have noticed, the arguments I've given you are very third world arguments. You see, you're already on the books. You've already got systems that interconnect in the United States or in Europe. It's all there. So you've got half of the information that's necessary to create a property right, but not the first half, which is what connects you to 70-80% of the world, which is where the Chinese are in advance of you.
Yeah, it's like providing cable internet in third countries when we have Elon Musk technology or other better connectivity for Wi-Fi connections. And so it's similar, like, why don't we jump into the most innovative technology, which is blockchain, to establish those rules of property rights that we have in the Western world, plus applying it together with the new technology. Mike, any comments on why blockchain?
Yeah, no, I mean, the word immutable is the exact one. I remember when I was first introduced to blockchain years ago, and there was somebody out of Silicon Valley he said, don't use the word blockchain. He says, use the word DWIAT. And I'm like, DWIAT? He said, database with immutable audit trail. That's all you need to know. Right? And so
Simple.
It
Simple.
stuck with me, right?
Yeah.
But that's the point, right? It's immutable, and people can't go back and change the records and stuff, right? I just saw on the advertisement on television where somebody, like stealing your title to your house and you don't know about it or whatever, right? I mean, it's an amazing thing to do. Another thing I was going to mention earlier when I was talking about sort of the secondary market piece of this is that if we can decrease the cost of buying and selling a house, that's going to have flow-through effects on mobility of people moving in the United States. In the United States, one of the great strengths of our economy has always been labor mobility. People move to where the jobs are, right? Now there's some more remote working where people can actually move to other sort of places, right? But labor mobility has actually been going down in the United States, and that's taking percentage points off of GDP and economic growth. And if we can get the transactions costs down, and the mortgage rates are starting to come down, right, where people aren't locked into their 3% mortgage and move somewhere else. We can get that. We can get more transactions, and even though there's smaller fees on each one, but the number of transactions goes up. But that's going to have flow-through effects in terms of the local economy and the national economy in terms of people moving to where the jobs are.
Yeah, because imagine instead of 7 million homes sold a year, we'll be selling 20 million homes. It's a better liquidity, better labor mobility. People won't be afraid to make a decision to move to another state for an opportunity or a family, where the transaction is not full of anxiety, whether they will be able to sell and what are the costs for the sale and so on. So I think it's an amazing opportunity for the real estate professional also to imagine that one day it won't be a 30-day closing. It will be a couple of days, maximum 1 week. It will be easy, simple, and then you'll serve more clients. And people will have this feeling of freedom that we all thrive for in America, to actually move and exchange our property rights in real estate or others seamlessly and secure, because as you mentioned, there are so many fraud cases, so many wire fraud, ownership being stolen from antiquated system, the recording systems, and now AI. Now AI is actually pretending to be sellers and selling properties online, pretending that they're a human. They're signing with the e-notary and getting over home ownership. So it's another huge risk that we're facing right now.
If I may, and I want to thank Mike for that. As I viewed American films, that's the way I got to know the United States first. I, for the first time, understood what I've seen in at least half American films, which is, honey, I've just been named vice president of the Milken Institute. You take the kids out of school, I'll sell the house, I'll see you there in 4 days.
Here you go.
Something like that. Yeah. No, it's clear.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Hernando, I think I want to wrap up with your third session at this conference. It was a privilege and honor to have you here today. You've influenced a lot of views of the Web3 doers like Brian Armstrong and Kathy Wood and Mark Andreessen. All those people understood the value of ownership, not only for real estate, but broadly for ownership of our data, of our identity. And you've been instrumental for many of us, very inspirational personally for me and for my team, and I'm sure for a lot of people here. By the way, if you have Hernando's book or you ordered it, please reach out for signatures right after this session. Any final words from you?
Well, I want to thank you for this conference, because I've learned a lot about things which I was not familiar with, even in the last session, which had to do with how do you bring information across, because that is basically what it's all about. Sorry, I keep on coming back with China, but it's become the most important investor in my country. That has consequences of all sorts. But what's interesting is that what Xi Jinping calls his new system, which usually is translated into socialism with Chinese characteristics, is really not that. It's capitalism. And the name for his system is the independent knowledge system, which is how do we get information and convert it to useful knowledge. And whoever's got that's got an advantage. So everything that you've been talking about makes me understand that the thing isn't simply that I'll be wearing shiny shoes or that I will have a Chinese car. It goes much further than that. Who's the best informed? And it's important to know that some people sometimes get ahead of us, whether we like it or not. And it's a good idea to study them. And that's why it's been so good to be here and learn so much from you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hernando. It's been an honor.